Okay, right. So just start over. So we've got Jane Hatfield today from Staywell Occupational Health. Staywell is very much local to us in West Kent. They're based out of Sevenoaks, and personally, I have used them a number of times for management referrals. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sandhya Iyer. I am the managing director of the HR department, which is an HR consultant based out of Tunbridge. And for the sake of my clients, I've worked with different occupational health therapists, as some of the HR professionals here will vouch for. And there's a specific reason why I've always stuck with Staywell, over the years. So it's over to Jane really for more information. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandhya. Thanks, guys. Thank you for letting us be part of your roundtable this month. I'm Jane Hatfield. I'm from Staywell Occupational Health. As Sandhya said, our head office is actually based in Sevenoaks, but we operate a nationwide across the UK. So we are an occupational health company. We were set up in our current form 8 years ago by an occupational health nurse and her 2 children, Hannah and Chris. Hannah was working at the time as a manager in food retail, and Chris was working in a laboratory. And Julie, the mum, the occupational health nurse, had a bunch of local contracts, and they decided that actually they'd set up an occupational health business between them. So 8 years down the line, we've now got a team of 30, of which there is the client services stroke admin team are based in Sevenoaks, Chipstead, and our clinical team are based across the UK. So we employ occupational health nurses and technicians around the country, and we deliver our services both remotely and in person. My role at Staywell is I look after the entire client service delivery. I work very, very closely with our clinical director, who unfortunately couldn't join us today because she's on a beach in Egypt. So that's fine, we can leave her there. But the clinical director, so we work closely together because obviously being clinical, it's very driven by the products and services delivered clinically. But I also talk to all our new clients. I look after our account managers. I help implement new products and services. So I feed back into product development in terms of what our clients are saying to us and what they are saying they require. In terms of occupational health, for those of you who are not familiar with it, I'm sure most of you are, it basically is looking at the balance of work and health and work. Just making sure that nobody's job is causing them illness, and making sure that someone's illness isn't causing them to have problems at work. So in terms of how we deliver our services, it goes across every single occupation. There's not one industry we don't touch. But in terms of how we deliver those services and which services are accessed will depend on the industry in which we're talking to. The key behind us is that we're purely ad hoc. So we can enter into contracts with clients, but they're never owners' contracts. They will have a 4-week period where they'd have to give notice. But because we don't charge a retainer fee, there's no tie-in with us. And we believe that's because we need to be accessible to people, and we believe that we need to deliver a good service, and that keeps us delivering that good service. So we will work with someone that employs a nanny, for example, who's off on long-term sick, and they require occupational health input as to what's going to be happening moving forward. And what we will do is we will look at what is wrong with the employee, we'll look at their job role, and then we'll advise accordingly. We're not a service that does diagnosis, essentially, and we're not an emergency response. In terms of the services that we offer, as I said, they go across all different businesses, but the ones that will stretch across every single business generally are our new starter medicals. So once someone's been offered their new job, we can then come in and do a new starter medical to make sure that that person is going to be fit to do that job. That can go across any industry, and that's generally a questionnaire. The HR person or line manager will submit their job description, the employee will receive a questionnaire, and then our clinical team will review that. If everything's good to go, we'll say, yep, they're fine to do their job. If it's not, we'll do a follow-up call or a management referral. Management referrals, generally, again, is a service that will be for any business, whoever uses us, and that will look at if you've got an employee that's off long-term sick, or has frequent absences from work, or has been diagnosed with something but is still trying to stay in the workplace. And the purpose of us is we will have a referral from the referring manager who will give the details of the job description, of anything that's been happening. And then we will speak with the employee, one of our clinicians will speak with the employee, and we will be looking at it essentially down the middle. We will have a look at the job, we will have a look at the employee, and we will then give recommendations as to how we think you should proceed with your employee. And then that would be looked at in conjunction with HR and line managers. We are just recommendations. We can't say that that's what you have to do. However, if people, I'm sure with the lawyers on this call, you'll be aware that if people don't engage with occupational health and ignore the recommendations, then that's not good. The other services that we offer through specialist third-party providers are neurodiversity solutions. So if somebody has an employee in the workplace who is neurodiverse with ADHD or dyslexia, and that comes up during a management referral, or they come to us and say, we have this employee struggling in the workplace, how can you help us? We will then work with them and use our third-party provider to either do a diagnosis, a screening, a workplace needs assessment. And that's a service we've recently introduced, probably in the last 3 months, with our new clinical director. And the uptake of that is quite something. There's a lot of people that have this. It's become much more aware. And also on the other side of it, they can do sessions with workplaces to help them become more neurodiverse aware, from the everyday to employment. And so, yeah, that's the both sides of that. We also offer as well counselling independently of a management referral. So if somebody is saying they have an EAP service, but their employee requires some counselling sessions, we can set that up as well. And then in terms of more specialised services, we work with, for example, people in the construction industry, and they may have their workers on a site, and we need to make sure that they're fit to do that work. So that might be a safety critical medical to make sure that that person who's driving that dumper truck on site isn't going to suddenly keel over with a heart attack, and that dumper truck's going to drive into a group of people. So we do those fitness medicals as well, and then we also do health surveillance. Think of an example, we work with a large bakery, and if they're dealing with flour each day, then we need to make sure that those respiratory sensitizers aren't having an impact on that employee's health. So we will bring them into a health surveillance program and do the medical testing to make sure that all the measures they've got in place to reduce exposure are working. And then if they're not, those medicals will flag it up. And then we do year-on-year analysis of the results to make sure that that work over that period of time isn't having an adverse impact on that employee's health. We also offer things like night worker medicals, we offer flu vaccines, we do drug and alcohol testing. So that can be baseline testing for when somebody's starting at work. A very large recycling client we have, they do the baseline medicals at that point. We also offer randomized testing throughout the year, and then we can arrange for for-cause testing, so following an incident at work. Or if someone is believed to have walked into the workplace under the influence, then they can sign up to our with cause testing, which can call people out within 2 hours, 24/7, 365. In addition, we can offer ergonomic workplace assessments, we can offer health screening and health promotions. So on the other side of it, we will look at, for example, if we've got a large utilities client who have a lot of mental health problems, we measure all the referrals that come through to us. We'll then give them a management information report to say, okay, 50% of your workforce have got mental health issues, 20% have got a medical condition. And then what we'll do is we might say to them, okay, you'll benefit from a business psychologist who can then come in and actually train your managers on how to identify mental health problems and how to cope with it and how to address it. So not only are we there to help support those employees that are struggling, but also we'll come in and say, actually, maybe we can do something the other way to help managers to reduce this in the first place. So in terms of targeted well-being, that's really, really good. But we also do offer things like health screening kiosks. We can do talks around health, well-being, nutrition, lifestyle on site or remotely. So that's more of the health promotion, as well as us just responding to illness or having to do medicals based on need within exposure at the workplace. And
thanks, Jane. I'm just conscious of time. I think you've given us a nice synopsis of what you are able to offer. If it's all right, can we take a few questions? And
yes,
if you can build in your, what you kind of are able to offer as part of those questions. And towards the end, yes, share any more information you've got with Catherine, and we'll circulate that as well.
Okay, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Over to our attendees. It's now your forum, so please fire away any questions you've got. Anyone at all?
Jane, I have a question.
Hi,
Okay.
Antonia.
I'm Antonia, Antonia from Thomas Mansfield, and we deal with
Hi.
employment law. I'm a solicitor advising on employment law, and I wondered, do you ever get involved with mediation, or is that sort of outside your remit?
We don't specifically get involved in mediation, no.
Yeah, I
It's
just
not
wondered.
within,
It's a separate area, really.
it tends to be far more specialised and far more sticky, and no, it's not something as a company that we particularly turn to, Antonia, no.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay.
Jane, I had a question actually, which was a recent case again. When I say recent, about 6 months ago. It was an interesting one and a first one for me, where we had got the employee's consent when sending off the management referral. The premise of the referral had all been explained to the employee. And when the employee sat down for the assessment with yourselves, turned around and said, "I'm not going ahead with this." So my question there is, when you have a written consent in front of you where everything's been explained, but you can almost see that, and it was very clearly a case of where this employee was just engaging in delaying tactics. What, in your view, is the best way to deal with that situation? Because everything's been explained, everything's been done, it's been signed, the appointment was set up. And I think much to the difficult, or rather the challenging situation that the client was faced with, it just meant that it was a wasted appointment, and we had to start from scratch. So what do you recommend to overcome something like that?
Did the appointment actually take place, Sandia, or was it, and the report wasn't released, or?
Well, the problem was there was no report, because even though the employee did have the phone assessment, in the sense it kicked off, but when the assessor or when the specialist started speaking with this individual, they said not going ahead with it. Not because the physician, the specialist said anything that we hadn't already shared, but just because they decided to change their mind, which I'm sure people have the right to do.
Absolutely.
But they have the right to do. But it's just that as occupational health advisors, what is your take on that? So when somebody just pulls out from an appointment, are you able to, my question is two-pronged. One is, are you able to sort of keep that say, okay, this client has paid for this assessment. Once they've had the chat with this employee, they come back, we continue the appointment. And two, what is your advice to avoid such a situation, notwithstanding that employees always have a right to say no? But this was really my first ever such experience in 20 odd years.
It's very, very rare that consent is given throughout the process, from engaging with the assessment to receipt of the report, that being released to the employer, and the employee at any point can withdraw their consent. It's very rare, Sandia, that happens. And ultimately, if it happens, you can't force an employee to engage in an occupational health referral. However, if they choose not to, then HR and line managers can make decisions without the input of occupational health. And then if there's evidence that you've tried to engage with an occupational health and the employee hasn't engaged, then any decisions that you make that might be perceived to be incorrect based on their medical condition can be discounted because they refuse to engage in an occupational health process in the outset. In terms of, sometimes you can't avoid it. We probably get a handful a year of the thousands we do of assessments. We probably get a handful a year there where the employees will withdraw consent at the point of release of report. We always talk to employers and say, we don't stress enough, and I know you said you did this at the outset, Sandia, so sometimes you just can't avoid it, but we always say, please talk to your employees, complete the management referral form with the employee so they're fully aware of what occupational health is and why we have our input. Some people use occupational health as a stick. to beat people with. They'll say, right, want to know if they can get to disciplinary, we want to know. And that's not the purpose of occupational health. The idea is for us to have that down the middle opinion to say, okay, this is the health condition. The GP signed you off for 6 weeks. However, here's your health condition. This is your work environment. We believe actually you can come back to work here. And these are the reasons why. And then when we do the report, the employee is always aware of what will be within that report before it's released to their employer. So there's no shocks when they get that report. Yeah. But it's so important that at the outset, people understand what occupational health is and what purpose we have in it. And
yeah, I think in this situation, in this situation, I think the employee was made well aware by the employer. I mean, I was there at that meeting as well. Mm-hmm. It's just that they decided to withdraw, and actually the report never happened because this is a discussion that took place between the OH specialist and the employee at the very start of the appointment. Mm-hmm. And I just got a call from Staywell to say he's just refused now and we can't issue any report because we couldn't even have the assessment with him. So leave alone issuing a report, I mean, saying we have a report and once he consents, we'll send it. We don't even have a report.
No, it's very rare, Sandhya. It's very rare, but it can happen. They can consent throughout the process. But it speaks more volumes as to what's happening with the employee, because a lot of the time when people have people off work sick, they don't know why. They might just get a doctor's note and they have no idea why. So it could be for any reason. They may say it's back pain, but actually the reason could be that they've got work-related stress issue that they don't want to tell anybody because they don't have that relationship with that line manager, or they're not aware, or so there could be so much at play. But the moment an employee does not engage with occupational health, that we cannot force that process. And if that employee was absolutely fully aware as to what was going to be happening within the assessment, then sometimes people speak to people again. The employees, we always say they're more than welcome to give us a call if they really are fearful, because some people have never come across occupational health and they don't know what it is.
No, they haven't. Yes.
Them. And it does scare some employees because they think it's going to be used against them, not as a tool to assist HR and line manager decisions. And that's where they become fearful. So, and I think, again, it's that conversation piece, but we're always happy for our clinical team to speak with employees to quell any fears ahead of an assessment if they become incredibly nervous.
Thank you. You touched upon an important point, I think. This is more a question for all the HR consultants in the room. I come across this quite often that, but I discover that clients actually aren't aware of occupational health until we advise them that there is this additional body that actually employers should be relying more on when dealing with a case of sickness management or, long-term illness. I mean, and it would be interesting to know whether other HR consultants have come across something similar.
I think for me, generally, people are fairly aware of occupational health, because I think as soon as there's an issue, then it's usually a conversation that I start having with people, and there is an awareness of it. Maybe not exactly what it does, and it's not necessarily the first thing that they think of, but I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and from the I'm not by any stretch a medical person, but from the characteristics of this individual they were talking about, it suggested to me that this person might have been suffering with depression. So my first call was, okay, let's get an occupational health assessment and talk to the employee about going down that route, because although we've had a conversation, they say nothing's wrong, something's not right.
And especially with mental health and musculoskeletal, early intervention is key, because it becomes very apparent if somebody's off work for 4 weeks or more, they're less likely to return to the workplace if they are the two conditions that are being presented. So it's really important to get that referral in early for a lot of companies to reduce that level of sickness absence, hopefully.
Yeah, I find it's an education process.
Can I ask a
Go
question,
ahead.
Sandy?
Sure, go ahead.
And it's an open question. At what point generally would it be appropriate to refer somebody to OcHealth for assessment, if it's a continuous period or if it's kind of sporadic? What's the general? I just want to get a consensus about what's appropriate, because I have always operated on the basis that if it's continuous, it's long-term sickness absence, which is sort of as soon as you hit 4 weeks, basically, it's kind of deemed to be term. What's the general consensus on that?
The
Am I
general
wrong?
consensus, it will depend on what's presenting. If it's, for example, if somebody has gone off and had surgery, if they've had an operation on anything, and you know that there is going to be an end period as to when they're going to be returning to work, it's unlikely going to need to involve occupational health, because you know if they've had a broken leg and they can't walk on it for the next 4 weeks, but they can then come into work after 2 weeks or work remotely, you don't really need us to tell you that. It's when it's the unknown. It's when there seems to be a pattern in the sickness, or someone keeps delivering you GP sick notes, but you don't know why, or their patterns develop where they're always off on a Monday, or they're always off on a Friday, or there's always a certain day of the week that they're off, or a certain period of the month. I think it's just, and sometimes a lot of it, as Karen would say if she was here, it's gut feel as well, bizarrely. If you generally feel that someone is just having a bit of a rough time and unlucky with certain events, but if you just feel, I don't know why this person's going off, it keeps happening and we're not sure, then it's worth referring to occupational health. Because when we do our assessments, we don't just look at what's being presented, we will look at the whole employee, we'll look at their home life, we'll look at everything around them, because it's not always that one thing that could be causing a whole host of problems around them. So the early intervention can really support what the workplace can do to support that employee and to remain in work, rather than keep going off. So there's no hard.
That could be any time before, in the run up to that. Doesn't necessarily mean. Well, I take the point about the operation and plan procedures and things like that. But it's just if something doesn't feel quite right, then it could be at any point once that sickness starts, not just once it hits long term.
Yeah, I mean, the minute you're not sure what's going on, if something's not right, especially early interventions, as I said, with mental health and musculoskeletal issues, definitely for sure. But it's just understanding if something's, there's no hard and fast rules when to involve occupational health. It's just when you realise there is a potential issue rising here, what's causing it. It could be work and health, or it could be that someone's having an issue with work. It could be a fallout with their line manager. We won't know that until we start having that conversation with them.
Okay, thanks.
It's not
Can I
clear
just
to
ask
us,
off-
unfortunately, Ros. Sorry.
Can I just ask off the back of that? Is that, I guess my thing is kind of alluding to something you said before. People might say, oh, I'm off with back pain, but actually there's a much deeper issue around mental health going on. How do the clinicians go to get to the bottom of that? Because it's very easy on a phone call for someone to be able to say, oh no, I'm fine, because they don't want to tell you that they're actually suffering with depression, because there's still this stigma around that. So how do you get to the bottom of people actually telling you the truth of what's going on?
Because they will trust our clinicians. A lot of the time they'll trust our clinicians. And what we'll do as a company is lots of different occupational companies will do different assessments. So we do, our standard assessment is an hour and a half. And that will around about 45 minutes with the employee, and another 45 minutes to write up the report. We might have an employee, we don't have to tell you everything that's going on clinically, but we can certainly guide you if we feel there's something deeper going on there. So it could be with the clinician might say, yes, this employee has back pain, but actually ultimately the biggest problem at work is they're having an issue with their line manager. So we might then say, we recommend that you get together with this employee and the line manager and discuss their work. But during our consultation, what we'll do, I'm just having a quick look at the on the side here, what we do. So we'll look at the review of previous employment history. We will look at the clinicians will look at past medical history. They'll look at lifestyle, hobbies, family, social aspects. They'll do a summary of the current health problems. They'll do a clarification of recent events, treatments, tests, referrals, how it's affecting their daily activities. They'll assess pain, they'll assess levels of mobility, their mood. They will then, so they're doing an entire assessment. If someone writes back pain on their referral form, our clinicians will still go in there and have a general conversation with them around everything, because then you'll find that what they're doing is they're teasing out that information. So the clinicians that work with us, if they're nurses, they're qualified nurses with further education in occupational health and experience within this industry. Or if it's triage to be a physician, again, these are doctors that have then gone on to do further training within occupational health. So it's the qualifications of the people that are doing these assessments that are there to draw out that wider subject area. And we will have a whole heap of clinical notes sitting behind that report that's come out to the employer, because you don't need to know all of that information. What's salient is we will guide you as to where we feel that employee needs that support, and we'll also signpost that employee to primary care if we can. We'll also take information on businesses about if they have an EAP service, if they have any other support areas that we can signpost that employee to. So it's a much bigger conversation there, Gemma.
Thank you.
I think recently I've also seen a really valuable report come out whereby the employee was stating, or it was believed that this person could be suffering from autistic spectrum and disorder, but and it was put forward as one of the mitigating circumstances during a disciplinary meeting. Fundamentally, it was where something was so black and white, and this individual just completely denied having any knowledge about it, and thereby resulted in few other damage to company assets, etc. But when the referral was sent to occupational health, we put in a lot of background, a little bit like what you said, where the specialist is teasing information out of the employee. We actually put in a lot about this employee's background, what the employer had done to support this employee, even on the personal front, given all the issues that this person was facing on the family front, and really how this individual was coming across at work, where there would just be complete apathy when it came to management instructions, late coming, leaving whenever they felt like. There were many other issues at play. And interestingly, occupational health came back with an assessment saying there's absolutely no autistic spectrum disorder here at all whatsoever. And that's, I think, the first where I've come across such a clear-cut report which says, you know, there is no issue here at all. I mean, the way this person engaged, we had quite a long drawn conversation. It was a video call, and the assessment was very clear that we didn't have to worry about autistic spectrum disorder at all.
Mm.
So that extreme is something that I've also seen more recently.
Sanjay, Jane, I just had a quick question. Ben Holt from Lock Associates Group. We use Staywell as well for our occupational health referrals. I was interested in some of the sort of the proactive work that you talked about earlier, particularly around neurodiversity. And I just wondered whether you could say a bit more about the type of work that you go into organisations and do, because I think, you know, not across the board, but there is, I think, still some skepticism sometimes of why you're referring me to occupational health. So employees will think, oh, well, this is the first step on getting me out of the business. And I just wondered whether actually doing some of that proactive work that's probably at the more, you know, that's received more positively, whether that kind of changes the perception of occupational health.
It does percentage. I think there's two questions there, Ben. I think there's one
Probably
more
are.
around the neurodiversity assessments and one generally about how occupational health presented. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, yeah. Neurodiversity is, so we work with a specialist third-party provider that offer our neurodiversity assessments and solutions. And so they can work directly with the employee by doing diagnosis or screening. They can do a workplace needs assessment. And out of that workplace needs assessment, they might recommend coaching. If it's somebody with dyslexia, they might recommend the type of support they require for their dyslexia. And they will give complete guidance on how that is what's needed, and then they can go on and do coaching to explain how the equipment works, and they can coach with the line manager as well. So some of the coaching they can do, it can be coaching directly with the line manager, with the employee, and then both of them together. Because what you'll sometimes find is if someone is neurodiverse, There could have been friction because the line manager isn't understanding it, the employee is getting frustrated, so that can build up that friction. So the coaching, what it can do is diffuse that. Both parties can understand, actually, these are the problems that this person is struggling with. This is what the person then is told how to use the support they're being put in place, and it helps make that understanding. On a wider level with neurodiversity, we don't offer these assessments directly, but we can set up the meetings with our third-party partner, who can then help organisations become neurodiverse aware. So they can run sessions for line managers, they can run sessions for employees about how neurodiversity, what it is, how it affects people within the workplace, and just make people far more neurodiverse aware across the organisation. And they can be, and they can also do online e-learning modules, and they've got a whole kit and caboodle about the whole thing from both aspects of it. In terms of engagement with employees and occupational health, that very much does become a one-to-one conversation with an employee once they are being asked to be referred to occupational health. On our employee consent form, we have 2 pages of frequently asked questions, and so the employee can understand what they should expect from an occupational health assessment and what will be asked of them and how the procedure works. And that's usually quite useful to share as well. But it's always worth having a positive conversation around occupational health, rather than people being guilty of potentially using it as that stick. But also it's really important that any referral people put through is incredibly thorough in what's there, because otherwise what you'll find is people will say, oh, Occ Health really does side with the employee, or they're siding with the employer, and that's not the purpose of what we do. The idea is to be straight down the middle and advise accordingly with the information we've got in front of us. So it's so important to get that piece right when it's submitted to us. And we've just started doing, as a company, for our clients, I don't know if you saw the emails coming out yesterday, Ben and Sandia, but we're doing lunch and learns for people to come along and to understand. We recently had some clients who, very large utilities company, have about 200 referring managers, but the quality of the reports were varying. So we did some sessions with their employees on how to make a management referral. We started off with what is occupational health, so the staff in the company could understand that. We then went through a session of how to make a management referral. And it's the understanding of the team around you that can then help get the best out of it. Even things like, once you've got the report, sit down with your employee, talk to them about the report. Don't just let the employee sit with it and you sit with it and it's just there. And then you can manage each other's expectations with that report. Say, okay, you've given us this, these are recommendations, this is what we can do as a business, this is what you can do as an employee. And it's having that ongoing conversation around what's in front of you. But the lunch and learns are there certainly going forward as of December to help people understand occupational health and the people that are involved in making those referrals to us and how to get the best out of them.
Thank you.
Jane, touching upon certain things that you've discussed, do you also build in some level of risk assessments when you do those assessments? So say, for example, we refer an employee who, we spoke about stress earlier, but this employee was presenting with skin conditions, and that was a symptom, but the cause was considered to be stress.
Yeah.
And yes, you can, we talk about stress management and all of that proactively, but when doing the report in terms of when this person is expected to return to work, what jobs, what they can or can't do and for how long, etc. When you draft that report, do you also, from your end, conduct some level of risk assessment and incorporate that into your report? Because I know risk assessment tends to be a very health and safety related thing, usually. Is that something that you guys get involved in?
We don't conduct the workplace risk assessments. We'd probably put links within our reports to the HSE to advise how to carry out risk assessments. When we're looking at, certainly with skin with stress, that's slightly different. Whereas if we're doing skin with health surveillance, it could be something that if the latex gloves they're wearing or products they're handling, and that very much becomes an on-site risk assessment to determine, could we use different gloves, or so we can advise within that specifically.
Within the report, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be, you wouldn't get involved in, besides doing the report, you wouldn't get involved in also carrying out a risk assessment because you're not health and safety. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Can I say something? Sorry, I haven't got a way of putting a hand up A, because
That's
you
all right,
can't see
Lane.
me,
Go
and
ahead.
B, because my Zoom doesn't seem to facilitate that. So sorry, everybody. But one of the things when I'm dealing with it, OH and making advising clients on how to make the referral, my experience has been that using a management referral form where you tick boxes as to what you want the OH practitioner to consider, it's absolutely important and really helpful to have the employees' engagement in that form, because obviously they've got a right to see that referral form. So giving it to them, making sure that they know that they can see the questions that are being asked of the OH practitioner before they have their appointment is helpful, because they may have an input and say, actually, you know, this is significant for me, and you haven't asked them to consider this. So that's helpful. And I've worked on ET cases, disability discrim cases, where the OH referral form has been obviously disclosable, and that's part of the bundle. But it's been a sort of revelation sometimes for the employee to see what their employer has asked, and it's very frequent that an employer can get themselves into trouble by asking questions that are potentially discriminatory. So earlier on in the referral form stage, devising that, putting that together, it is a really good plan, and reduces risk for the employer if they can ensure that the employee has seen those, you know, what the practitioner is being asked for. Did you include that in your lunch and learning chat?
Yes, absolutely. I can certainly give that feedback back to them, and it's so important. I spoke to a new client recently who said they'd asked a question that the occupational nurse advisor had actually asked the employee. It's a legal document. We have to pose the question the way employers put the question in, but they felt that it was a bit contentious the way they'd worded it, and that we should have changed the way, well, not us, it was the other provider, but the clinician should have changed the way the question was put because it upset the employee. And I said, we can't police how you ask those questions, and we have to present those questions the way they're given to us in that referral form. So it's a really valid point, Elaine, that you mustn't be anything that's going to start causing anyone to get upset is not good. And it's also interesting how you ask your questions. For example, if you say to an employee, what job are you capable of doing? They'll probably say, I can work on a Thursday at about midday for 2 hours because I know my friend's with me then, or when I can take a lunch break in that. Whereas if you actually, the question is, what is the capability of this employee? It's a completely different answer. So it's very important that the questions you ask are going to give you the answers that you require. Otherwise, it can be led by the employee, and they will, given half a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just jump in here? I mean, there's this thing about we shouldn't upset the employee, and I get that, but I just think sometimes the matter is really contentious, and we know that it is going to rock the boat. For example, one of the questions on the forms I've noticed is this person capable of attending a disciplinary meeting or not? Especially if somebody is dodging and engaging in delaying tactics. That's going to be a very clear-cut question of yes or no. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's going to upset the employee, but one needs to get to the end game at some point. So I think yes, I do appreciate the importance of not being or wording your question in a way that gets the same answer but isn't discriminatory. But I think we also, as HR professionals, can't always be seen to be pleasing everybody involved. Roz, yes, thank you.
Just thinking about that scenario, Sandia, quite often when I've done OH referrals for that reason, because somebody's off because of disciplinary hanging over them, or even a grievance actually that they have put in, the OH recommendation is that the situation is resolved because it's the situation itself that is being unresolved that is causing them the stress. So it kind of you know, that is extremely helpful.
Gemma.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of follow on from that, because I've also had the situation where we've gone through occupational health, we've got the reasonable adjustments, and then the employee has then refused to comply with the reasonable adjustments, or they've said, even though you've got the piece of paper that says these are going to help you and support you in your work, they then go, well, that's not enough, or actually they find a way. So it may be that you have part-time working in from home. Actually, their role is needed in the office, so you agree a part-time working from home arrangement. And then they find a way to eke that out so that actually they end up being full-time working from home, and then they blame the symptoms of whatever has caused them to go to occupational health in the first place. And you're kind of left going, well, hang on a minute, we've had this assessment, we need you in the office, we've made a compromise by following the recommendations and the reasonable adjustments, yet it's still not enough. And that is a situation that I find quite difficult. I don't know whether that's something that anyone else has experienced, or Jane, whether you've got any advice on kind of what do we do in that situation? Is it a case of going back to occupational health?
I think it's very important, it's clear when you set out in the initial referral what is the requirements of that role. If that person's job, it needs to be in the company so many days a week, and that's you can give a good business need for that reason, then yes, a reasonable adjustment might be that they work from home for a period of time. However, and it's made clear once that report is discussed that it is just for a period of time, but ultimately that role requires you to be in the office. For example, if we've got somebody working in a shop, they can't work from home. It's not possible. So if we understand at the referral point that this person needs, this is their role and this is what's required of that role, and at the end of the day, if they ultimately can't fulfill that role, then it goes down to a capability. And then it goes down a different route. But I think it's important that when those are, if it's agreed to put those measures in place, that there's a set time limit as to when it's going to be reviewed. And then if it does need to go back to occupational health, because then it could be that person's got very comfortable sitting at home, doesn't want to go into the office because they've got this going well. So then, yes, you'll always get employees that will play the system. So absolutely. But also what we do offer is a case conferencing service. So once you've got your report, if we've advised the employee can work from home 3 days a week or recommended it, but as a business that's not going to work for you, and you say this to the employee and they butt back at you, what our case conference services can do is we can get around a Zoom meeting. Generally would be the employee, HR, line manager and the clinician, and we can sit in a room, discuss the report that's on the table, but we can, so you can say, actually as a business, we can't accommodate this, but with the employer saying, I have to have this, we, our clinician at the time, can then give you the clinical input as to actually, I've said this in the report, but what you're saying, what the employee is saying, yes, they're capable of doing this. So it can be talked to if you've got a report, and always with us as well, if you have a report and you think actually this isn't feasible, then call us, contact us, speak with a clinician, come back to us, because what we don't ever want is people to have a report sitting there that makes it worse. You don't want the situation to be made worse, and it's what you agree at the time. It's being very clear to the employee how long you can carry on with this, and then yes, we refer to occupational health if it's not going the way you need it to. But ultimately it's where you then put in your HR policies as to how you manage that situation going forward.
Just an extension of Gemma's question, in terms of reasonable adjustments, I suppose the one has to be very clear that it's got to be reasonable for that specific employer's operations, because what's reasonable for one employer doesn't have to be reasonable for somebody else. And I guess for you, it would be a lot more useful as a question. This is my question to you. It's a lot more useful for you and, I mean, your clinicians to understand not just what condition we're looking to understand more about with regards to the employee, but really what is the nature of the business? What are the shortcomings of the business? What the business is able to achieve around this person's role? You know, how is it impacting on the team? All of that, isn't it? In order to recommend what a reasonable adjustment would be for this particular business.
Yeah, because you know your business, you know your employees. We can't know that unless we've been working for a long time with certain clients. We can't know exactly what they are. So unless we're told, for example, we have a recycling company we work with, and we understand that they have loaders. So they have to get up at 5:30 every morning, and they have to walk 12 miles a day, and they have to be able to lift 50 kg. if they can't do that, they can't return to work. They can't start working for half a morning and then sit on the lorry and not do the rest of their shift. So it's a case of once we've understood what is required of that role and that business, we can then give correct advice accordingly. Absolutely. It's giving us that insight into that business that enables us to do a report that works for you. For sure.
Sorry, can I ask Jane? It's Elaine here. When you have those case conferences to get some further clinical input, how much more is it on top of the original report, or are you doing a sort of package? Because the OH people that we use at the moment, you have you pay for a report, and then you pay for a review in a few weeks' time, so you get the cost of that is slightly less. But if you additionally had a conference, that would be even more. So it's all ending up, it should be quite a big deal for the employer to invest in. But I just wondered whether you how did your charging work? I suppose essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fine. The initial assessment, the plan we have is that we hopefully give you a good enough report to address the concern you've put to us. So we have quite a low re-referral rate. I think it's about 90% of our cases are essentially supported by the report they have. In terms of case conferencing, Elaine, yes, it is an additional cost of £238 to discuss that report on top of the report. But what it can do is further down the line save quite a lot of issues and maybe solve something much quicker than if it was just left with. It will be recommended by our clinical director if we keep getting requests from the employee to change the report. If it keeps happening, or if the employer keeps coming back, then we'll say, actually, come on, let's go to case conferencing. But it's used very infrequently, Elaine. It really is.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you for that.
That's okay.
Anyone else? Paul, we haven't heard from you.
No,
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, nothing to add or ask Jane and the team. No, it's been really helpful to hear how you operate. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else? Hello.
Yeah, no, it's just a small point which just relates to this whole question about what reasonable adjustments are. And yeah, I understood all the points were made, but I was going to say is that how much pushback do you get? And I appreciate also reasonableness for one employer and one situation is different to what's considered reasonable for a different employer and a different employee in a different situation. So, how do you get people to sort of see that something is reasonable rather than only them seeing what they're willing to do?
That comes down to the employer being able to put a business case forward if it's not reasonable. And that business case being put forward by the business could be, we can't accommodate this because it would have the impacts on X, Y, and Z. And if you can justify that as a business that it is not reasonable for us to do, then you are justified to say that to your employee. We can only recommend. Some people have their report is that like, you said I can have this, and this. Well, actually, no, as a business, that's what the ideal, that's where we'd like it to be. But actually, as a business, if you can come back with a solid case as to why it can't happen, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay, but then what do you, I mean, that's great. That's very, definitive. But then how do you handle the situation after that then? For the employee, I mean.
That then becomes a conversation between whether that employee can continue in that job role.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
That then becomes if this is what the employee needs in order to stay in work and the role they're doing, yet as a business you can't accommodate what they're requiring, then for example, if you have a situation where someone works on the 3rd floor of a building, they suddenly have become wheelchair bound, and the recommendation is they need to put a lift in for an employee to get to their place of work. You are in a building that's serviced, you cannot install that lift. So at that point, you can't accommodate that adjustments, that employee can't get to the workplace. So again, it then becomes to a point where you say, actually, you cannot do that role anymore.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the answer. Thank you very much. It's very clear.
That's okay.
Louise? Hello.
Hi there. Yeah, no, thank you. It's all been really interesting. I haven't come across Jane in the business before, so it's really helpful to be familiar with you now. Thank you. I think the only thing going through my mind, one of the things we've had with our OH providers is this the information in terms of them having enough information. So exactly what you've been saying, Jane, and I always try to impress upon our clients that it's really important that you do a good referral with enough information in there. But I think sometimes that businesses don't have the time to do it, and that's a difficulty that it is worth spending the time. So again, you know, if you can impress that on businesses as well with your lunch and learn sessions, I think that would be really helpful. But one of the things we're finding is that a lot of OH providers have moved away from in-person meetings, and I think that's the impression I'm getting from yourself as well, that it's more online rather than in person. And I think something's been lost by that, not having the in-person meetings anymore. And some of my clients have said, well, we've asked for an in-person and the OH providers refused and say, no, it's got to be online. Would you do, if someone says we want an in-person meeting, would you refuse that, or how do you deal with that?
Yes, correct, you're right, Louise. Since COVID, it's gone from everything being face-to-face to a lot of it being delivered by video or phone. People believe that there is an element of it lost. Yes, we can arrange a face-to-face appointment, absolutely, if someone says, but it's usually based on clinical need. So if our clinical team triage a referral that's come through, they say, right, we can speak with this employee over the phone or by video. Or if there is a complex medical condition that does need a face-to-face referral, then absolutely we will advise that's required. But I feel there's a lot of people feel there's more out of that face-to-face than there is the phone or video. But what we find with a couple of contracts we have where the employees are, where we have nurses that go to site and do a day of management referrals, you might find 4 of them don't turn up because they're off work sick. So they don't want to come to the workplace. So what we're finding is actually the ones we do where we do have clinicians on site, they might do 4 of those by phone anyway. So I think there's this hangover that people feel that it's face-to-face is better. But I think once you've got a clinician that's got a good amount of information and clear information in that referral form, then they can advise after speaking with that. They're literally speaking. We're not diagnosing. We're not physically examining anybody. We're not giving a diagnosis. We're literally looking at the information we have and advising accordingly. So yes, there's most providers have moved away from face-to-face because what they're finding is the time spent for those clinicians to travel to site, to spend the time to then maybe come back again, is time where you can actually be spending doing more referrals. So it's coming down to a business case, to be quite frank in that respect, Louise. But yes, we can arrange for a face-to-face referral, but it takes longer to take the employee out of, to take our nurses out of that day rate, and then it takes a while to get them face-to-face. But clinically, if we felt that it was required, absolutely we would recommend it, yes.
Lovely, that's really helpful. Thank you, Jane.
That's okay.
Any more questions? I've just seen the time and it's just flown the whole hour. We just going to brief you about the next meeting before we close off. We've got our next meeting on the 31st of January, same time, 10:30 to 11:30. I don't yet have a guest speaker, and that's not a problem, because if we don't, then we just fire away, it'll just be an open forum where we share questions and discuss amongst ourselves. But I'm going to try and get somebody in. And if you've got any specific specialism or area that you would like to discuss, then definitely pop both me and Catherine a note, and we'll try and source an expert in that area. Yeah, but otherwise we can just carry on this discussion until 11:30. That's not a problem. Kate, we haven't heard from you. Sorry, Elaine, go ahead.
Sorry, I was about to say, has everyone clocked that the definition of day-to-day activities, it's not the definition, but the Equality Act amendment regulation is part of it includes a change to the definition of disability, so that's quite interesting. So they've got, so I think it's day-to-day activities includes work. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's probably going to be helpful for both employers and employees, this change. Anyway, you probably all knew about that, but I thought I'd just raise it.
I think Elaine as well. It just puts into law what's already sort of case law anyway. But you're right. It's always better to have these things in black and white. It just helps the conversations on both sides, doesn't it?
Anyway, thank you very much, Jane. It's been really, really, really good.
You're welcome.
Jane, feel free to, if you've got a presentation, just sort of encompassing everything you've wanted to share today, send it over to Catherine, and we'll share that with our members and everybody who's attended today. This discussion obviously will be shared on YouTube as well. It's going to be on the Chamber website. So yeah, so it's going to be shared. But if nobody has any other questions, happy to sign off. And it's been good to see everybody. Have a lovely, lovely Christmas. We might be seeing some of you around for a couple of other chamber events in the coming month. But otherwise, yeah, take care and see you in the new year.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks.